You're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and filling in for my co-host Burton DeWitt, who is still away on holiday. I'm pleased to be alongside another one of the all-time greats when it comes to darts statisticians. You may have heard his name mentioned on ITV during the World Series of Darts finals recently. He is the founder of the famous FDI rankings, a statistical analyst for Darts Oracle. It is Mr. FDI himself, Lendel Faria. I hope that was a good enough introduction for you. Thanks for stepping in. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. That's beyond good enough. That's even too much honor for me. So, yeah, thanks for that amazing intro, and I'm happy to fill in. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Good man. Well, we're off to a good start, and it's quite a busy few days for me this week before I head off Thursday morning for the rest of the week. So we couldn't leave you guys without a podcast this week. So much going on at the moment. We're going to have a look ahead to the World Grand Prix a little later on, make some predictions as well. We'll hopefully be joined by two of the players that are going to be in Leicester for that event next week. I won't jinx that just yet, so I won't say who they are, but if you're listening to this, you'll know if we're able to get them or not. Let's get into a look back at the Euro Tour at the weekend and Dave Chisnall beating Andrew Gilding 8-6 in Sunday night's final to win the Belgian Darts Open. It's Chizzy's 16th PDC title, a third Euro Tour title, and a first title in the PDC for 3 years. He threw a 9-darter on the way to that title as well, and as luck would have it, he is the new FDI number one in your rankings as well, Lendel. So is it time to start putting Chizzy's name in that conversation for the major titles coming up?
Yeah, in terms of current form, he's definitely in that conversation. He's been playing some wonderful stuff and won the Belgian Darts Open last weekend, as you just mentioned. He did it in some style, especially his 9-darter in the semi-final was a highlight of the weekend. But he hasn't just been good for this weekend. If we look at how he's performing in recent weeks, we will see he's won a very healthy 39 of his last 50 matches in all events. That's a conversion rate of 76%. In comparison, the big three are some way off that number. Michael van Gerwen has won just 34 of his last 50 matches, Price 33, and Peter Wright 31. So it's safe to say that we can objectively say that he's in better form than all the usual suspects. On top of that, he had some very decent results at the World Grand Prix in the last 2 years with a semi-final and a quarter-final. So the fact that he's in good form and that he's done well in the double start format in the last 2 years means for me that he's, as far as I'm concerned, in that conversation for this event. Maybe not as favorite number one or number two, but definitely in that group of 3 or 4 favorites just behind the top favorites.
Yeah, I think it's time as well. And if you're Andrew Sinclair, who was my co-host on this show a few weeks ago, he tipped Dave Chisnall to win the World Series of Darts finals. And we're not going to open up the debate again on whether that event is a major or not. Some say it is, some say it isn't. But Andrew said when he picked Chizzy to win that title, it was a rogue choice. And I guess in some ways it was, back in a player who had yet to win a TV title, still hasn't, and to win their first one. And this is a player who at that point hadn't won a title of any sorts in the PDC for more than 3 years. But Chizzy is someone that is maybe not regularly tipped to win these major titles when they come around, but we've seen over the last, well, probably more than a decade now, that he is someone that is capable of doing some damage, going on a deep run, making finals, semi-finals, quarter-finals, and unsettling the established order, if you like. And 2 recent examples of that, we go to the World Championship last year when he whitewashed Michael van Gerwen in the quarterfinals 5-0 with that 107 average, and that won our Upset of the Year award. And even this year as well, that the Masters, beating 3 players that would go on to play in the Premier League this year: James Wade, Michael Smith, Johnny Clayton, and the last of those was the defending champion of the Masters at that point. And both of those occasions, Chizzy didn't get the job done. He lost in the final of the Masters, lost the semi-finals of the World Championship. And, you know, he's a player that's had a lot of runs to finals in TV. I think he's had 9 TV finals now, but he's still got that belief that one day that first title on TV, that first major, is going to come his way. And to win 16 titles as he's done now in the PDC, that is an impressive haul. And you look at his run to the title at the weekend, he had a 170 finish in his first game. The second game against Nathan Aspinall, okay, he picked his pocket a few times. Both of those players missing doubles, and it was the same in the game against Jose de Souza. But Chizzy had a couple of 100-plus finishes, which took the game away from him. And then, of course, the 9-dart leg in the very first leg of that semi-final against Danny Noppert, a 103 average, a few more 100-plus finishes in there, and the final against Andrew Gilding, was solid enough. Wasn't his best performance of the weekend, but did enough to get over the line. And I think the game management in that final in particular, you could tell he was the one that had been in those positions a lot more than Andrew Gilding, and did enough to get over the line. And yeah, to win the title just before we come into the World Grand Prix, to win a title on stage, that will give Dave Chisnall a lot of confidence. And I think he'll have more confidence now than he's had for a long time, probably in the last 3 years, because we know how much winning these Euro Tour titles can do for players' confidence. They can then go on to win major titles. We've seen Joe Cullen do it, not as quickly after he won that first Euro Tour, but he managed to do it, and Jose de Sousa as well. So I think we've got to put Dave Chisnall's name in the conversation for these majors coming up. What about the runner-up, Andrew Gilding, who was looking to win his first PDC title, just fell short in the final, only a couple of legs short of winning that first title? But how impressed have you been, Lendel, with Goldfinger's rise in 2022?
I've been very impressed, as he's been, for me at least, one of the revelations of the season in the PDC. To be honest, I didn't see this coming, as I thought that Goldfinger's best years were behind him. But the year 2022 for him has already been the best earning year, as he won £68,500. And his best year to date was in 2015, when he was a very good £61,000. And most of the bigger events have yet to take place this season. So he's expected to get a lot more than £68,500. Andrew Gilding has already made 3 ranking finals this year. PC 19 in early July, PC 9 in April. And the run to the final last weekend wasn't an easy one, to say the least. He beat Whitlock, Van den Berg, Zonneveld, who had just beaten Wright. He beat Schindler and Johnny Clayton. Just an interesting stat to show how good Goldfinger's form is right now. He has won 34 of his last 50 matches. So he's at par with MVG and higher than Price and Wright. Then Dawson should be considering planning his chase stack ventures around the Darts event, because a Goldfinger event is becoming more likely by the minute.
Yeah, things have really picked up for Andrew Gilding this year, and I guess you could put him in that bracket with Martin Lukeman as well, who made a final on the Euro Tour earlier this year. But both of them to put a disappointing first year of their tour card last year behind them and really push on this year. And that's not easy to do. I think we see players get their tour card at Q School or via other routes, and some of them will kick it off straight away. They'll have a really good first year, carry it on into the second year, sometimes not do as well in the second year. But for players to have a poor first year and then do what Martin Lukeman and Andrew Gilding have done this year, make the World Match Play, make the World Grand Prix, European Championship, 3 of the hardest majors to qualify for, and they're obviously going to be in the Players' Championship finals and the World Championships at the end of the year as well. But it is very impressive. And just to focus on Andrew Gilding, I was looking at your website, Lendel Darts Oracle, and looking at Andrew's average for 2021 was 90.5. This year it's 95.33. So he's put on almost 5 points on his average from last year to this year, and 15th, I think, in the averages in the PDC this year, which goes to show just how well he has been playing this year. And okay, maybe we'll see him one day make the top 16 in the actual rankings. I think that's going to be a big ask, and to do that, he is going to have to start winning more games on TV again, like he did in his first run in the PDC. But I think he'd feel there's more to come, because we've seen he's able to produce those high 90 averages on stage, sometimes getting into the low hundreds as well. And on the floor, we always knew he was capable of doing that. But I think to get that more consistent on the stage, I think is going to be the next step for him, because, as I say, we've seen him average in the high 90s, but we've also seen him dip below that 90 mark into the high 80s. And at this level that we're at in the PDC, more often than not, if you do dip below that 90 average, you will come unstuck. And okay, won his quarterfinal against Martin Schindler with an 87 average. Neither of them were at their best, but in the final dipped below that 90 again. And in a close game like it was with Dave Chisnall, that proved to be costly for him in the end, that he wasn't able to bump that average up to the high 90s and into the hundreds like he did at points during the weekend as well, because it was a great run to the final. And you have got to tip your hat to him, Andrew Gilding. It's been an incredible turnaround from where he was at at the end of last season, and we've seen him have a good spell in the PDC before 2014 to 2016 when he was making all these major events, and of course that semi-final run at the UK Open as well is one that we won't forget. But he'll want this second run, if you like, in the PDC to be a lot longer than that one, and yeah, he's not got a lot to defend next year, so he is pushing towards that top 32, maybe even before the end of this year, but next year looks like a safe bet to say he'll be in that top 32, and who knows how far he can push on after that. Well, let's get into our first guest on this week's show. He is the man who is going to be defending his World Grand Prix title, the former Premier League champion, the former Masters champion, World Cup champion, and one of the most important awards of all, the reigning weekly Dartscast Player of the Year. Here's our chat with Johnny Clayton. Thanks again to Johnny for joining us now, continuing our look back at the weekend. And away from the Euro Tour, we had the first PDC Asian Championship, which was won by Christian Perez, the Philippines player, booking his spot in the Grand Slam of Darts in November. And he was one of 4 players to book their spots at the PDC World Championship as well. We have 3 players from the Philippines that are going to be coming to Ali Pali in December. Lawrence Alagan, Paolo Nebreda, and from Japan, Toru Suzuki, all getting those spots at Ali Pali. But it was the first time we've seen this event, the Asian Championship. Lendel, what did you make of the event, and do you think it's here to stay?
I thought the event was brilliant, and it was a good choice by the PDC to stage the event in Japan. I think the strength and depth in Japan is unlike any other country in Asia, maybe apart from the Philippines. But it was good to see a lot of those players making the trip to Fukuoka to test their game against the best of the best from the continent. It was a real shame that the likes of Noah Melekdem, Kai Van Leung, and Zhao Shenshong didn't attend the event. Those are 3 players who all could have won the event despite of their absence. The standard was actually really good. Saw a lot of high 80s, low 90 averages. If Nitin Kumar, who we all know to be a very good dart player, doesn't come through the early stages of the competition, it says something about the players that did qualify for the Asian Championships. If it's here to stay, I really hope so. I think I speak for a lot of dart fans in the world if I say that we would love to have a full Asian tour back to what it was pre-pandemic. A PDC Asian Championship is a lovely way to top off the second best tour in the world of sports for the year.
Yeah, it was great to see this event get off the ground, one that was announced back in June. So for the players, for the fans, we've waited patiently for it, and the rewards that were up for grabs, as I mentioned, it made it an interesting event to follow, with that spot in the Grand Slam, with the spots in the World Championship, and a good bit of prize money on offer for the players as well. And the bits that I saw, I certainly enjoyed it, and I know there wasn't any commentary on the stream, which might have added to it, but I think most people enjoyed the chance to watch a lot of these players again, and some of them for the first time in a while. And we were used to having that PDC Asian Tour streamed and seeing a lot of the players from Asia in action on that. So to get that back for the 4 days that we had, the Asian Series, the qualifiers, to get into the Asian Championship, the first couple of days last week, they were shown as well. And I think all the knockout games from the last 16 onwards were on the stream as well. So a lot of darts to enjoy at the weekend, and the bits that I saw timed it quite well. Got to watch Paul Lim's game in the last 16, and Paul almost pulling off that epic comeback from 4-1 down against Toru Suzuki. He had a 170 finish, but missed 2 match darts in the decider. And I know a lot of darts fans gutted that we're not going to see Paul Lim at Ali Pali this year, but chatting to Paul on the show as we did last week, his passion for darts is going to keep going, isn't it, for many more years. And I hope we'll see him at Ali Pali again, and maybe the next time we see him, he'll be in his 70s and really extend that record that he's got as the oldest player to play in that event. But yeah, I think as an event, it's going to be one that evolves, and we've said on the show recently, when that Asian Tour returns, hopefully next year, although we're not sure on the details on that, we'll see this Asian Championship continue, and we'll have that spot in the Grand Slam each year as well. And maybe we'll see the spots for Ali Pali shared around. We'll see maybe 1 or 2 go to the Asian Championship, and maybe 1 or 2 go to the top performers on the Asian Tour. So it gets a lot of players involved in all the events. I like the idea of spreading those spots out across the various events. But as far as the format, I know there was a few of our listeners that got in touch. They thought the format was pretty good, apart from maybe 48 players having 16 groups of 3. I think a few of our listeners maybe wanted to see bigger groups, and a lot less of the groups decided on goal differentials, as we like to call it on the show. So maybe they could do, if they're keeping it with 48 players, they could have 12 groups of 4, and we could have the top 2 go through, and the 4 best third place players also make it through to that last 16. I don't know, but I think, yeah, the 3-person groups, I've never been a fan of it personally. I much prefer having 4 players in a group, but I think overall, as a first go, it went down well, and the interest was there as well at the weekend. The appetite for Asian darts in the PDC, you thought it might have waned a little bit because we've not had that Asian tour for the last 3 years, but it soon picked up again. And seeing the likes of Paul Lim, Makuru Suzuki, Seigo Asada playing in the event, it's players that we like to watch. So hopefully we'll see it again in 2023. And let's look ahead then. We've got the World Grand Prix, which gets underway on Monday next week. And when we put the questions out for this episode, Michael van Gerwen was the slight favourite with the title sponsors Ball Sports. Since the draw has come out, the world number 1 Gerwen price has gone to favourite with the title sponsors. But what are your thoughts, Lendel? Who do you make as favourite for the World Grand Prix next week?
I would say Michael van Gerwen. Even though it's not by a long shot, but I would say Michael van Gerwen. Out of the big three, nobody is really ahead of the rest in terms of form or dominance. I think it'll come down to Michael van Gerwen and Gerwen Price, with a slight edge going to Michael van Gerwen because of the fact he has a quote-unquote easier route to the final. Having Anderson, Bunting and Dolan in your section looks to be a kind of draw than having Schindler, Cullen and Hatta in your section, especially with this short format, best of 3 sets, double in. The earlier rounds could become a banana skin, and I think with this draw, it's more likely that Gerwen would slip than MVG. So that's why I'm going for MVG.
Yeah, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I'm going to go with the world number 1 Gerwen Price as my favourite to lift this title. I don't think there's too much between the 2 players, Gerwen Price and Michael van Gerwen. The odds suggest that as well. Since the draw was made on Monday, Gerwen Price has gone favourite with the bookmakers at 4-1. Michael van Gerwen just behind him at 9-2, and I think the draw has probably had a factor in that. Michael, on paper, I think a lot of people say, oh, Gary Anderson, that is a star-studded game. That's a really tough draw, but I'd probably say Martin Schindler, who's going to play Gerwen Price in the first round, that is a harder first-round game. So I think if Michael gets through that first round game against Gary Anderson, he will probably go the favourite with the bookmakers, and we could see that position change a few times during the week as each player, if they do, progress through each round. But I just think based on what we saw in the World Series finals a couple of weeks ago, that was a very good weekend for Gerwen Price, the amount of close games that he was able to get through. And you look at this World Grand Prix, that the first round, first to 2 sets, double starters, all the games are, it is probably one of the hardest first rounds to get through of all the majors in the PDC. And Gerwen Price, I think last year averaged a ton in his first round game to get through. So we know that in that short race, he can produce a very high level. And if he's able to produce anywhere near that in the first round, he is going to take some stopping. And won the title 2 years ago, made the final last year. I think he's going to be the man to beat next week as he looks to get to another final in this tournament. I'd probably put Gerwen Price as the favourite. After that, I'm looking at Michael van Gerwen. So I think, yeah, not too much between the 2 players as far as the bookmakers. And I think based on what we've seen recently in the draw, I'm gonna say the same. So for me, Price at number 1 favourite, van Gerwen at number 2, but not too much in it. And we'll come back in a moment. We'll pick out our first round ties that we're most looking forward to. Then we'll get to our predictions. We'll give a dark horse, our 2 predicted finalists, and who we think is going to walk away with the World Grand Prix. But before we do, let's get to our next guest on this week's show, a player that is back in the World Grand Prix after a little while away, made the Belgian Darts Open final at the weekend. It is, of course, Goldfinger Andrew Gilding. Thanks again to Andrew for joining us. Now we'll finish up the show with our continued look ahead to the World Grand Prix. The draw is out, came out on Monday yesterday when we're recording this. Lendel, which first round ties are you most looking forward to in Leicester?
For me, it just simply has to be the match between Johnny Clayton and Dirk van Dijvenbode. They just came off of a belter of a meeting at the Euro Tour in Wiese, Belgium. Both averaged above the 105 mark in what was a thrilling match. Johnny even hit 6 out of 7 attempts at the doubles. And it's always nice to have a checkout performance like that, especially in the week leading up to the World Grand Prix. Dirk the upcoming week is defending £50,000 from his final that he lost to Price 2 years ago. That fact brings a bit of pressure for him, I think, as it's the first time in his career he's defending this type of money, and he could possibly drop outside of the top 16 if other results don't go his way. But you never know with Dirk, because his ceiling is extremely high when everything clicks for him. All these things add up to what should be a brilliant and exciting match. As of now, I give Clayton the slight advantage, but anyhow, if this match will be half as good as the one we just saw last weekend, we'll be in for a treat.
Yeah, I can't argue with that one. And me and Burton, when we get round to this preview for the World Grand Prix each year, we do tend to say it every year, but this event does lend itself to providing us with one of the most tasty first round draws of any of the major events in the PDC. And I guess it's helped by the fact that only the top 8 players are seeded. So you could have the world number 1 against the world number 9 in round 1. You could have the number 9 against the number 10, top 16 players going against each other from the first round. And we've got that here. I think there's 4 examples that you mentioned. One of them, Johnny Clayton, Dirk van Dijvenbode. You've also got Michael Smith, Nathan Aspinall, Dimitri van der Berg, Dave Chisnall, and one of the ties we've already mentioned, Michael van Gerwen against Gary Anderson. And I know he didn't have the best weekend on the Euro Tour, but Chris Dobey, Luke Humphries, I think that is one of the games that I'm most looking forward to. And we've seen some signs since Blackpool when Chris Dobey let that big lead slip against Rob Cross, I think something like 8-2 up and lost that game. But since then, he's shown some signs of coming back into some form, and going up against Luke Humphries, it is a matchup that we'll remember. That game they had at Ali Pali last year, and it was during that run of days where I think something like 4 or 5 days in a row we had a match of the year contender each day, and those two provided one of them. And I know this is going to be different to that game. It is best of 3 sets as opposed to the best of 7 straight on that we got at Ali Pali. But if both players can get going, I think that could be a really fun watch. You mentioned that Johnny Clayton, Dirk van Dijvenbode game. That's one of the games I had down here as well. That's one that I'm looking forward to, as well as the Dimitri van der Berg, Dave Chisnall game, which is just underneath those two. And to think only one of those 4 players will get through to the quarterfinals, that is such a tough little section of the draw to call. And the last one I'll give a nod to as well is Michael Smith, Nathan Aspinall, and that's got the makings of a mini classic between those two. In this event, probably more than any other, just getting past that first round, it can feel like such a big win, especially if you have to get past one of your fellow big hitters to get into that second round. If you can get through that first round, then the format goes up a little bit to the first of 3 sets. I think either player that gets through that will take a great deal of confidence, and it could be their week. We could see Michael Smith get that first major title, or we could see Nathan Aspinall get major number 2. So that is, I think, a big game to look forward to. And we'll finish up the show with our predictions. Lendel, I want your dark horse for the tournament, your 2 predicted finalists, and it's your chance to put your name in the hat for the tip of the year in the weekly Dartscast Awards. No one's really making a name for it at the moment, but who you think is going to lift the title in Leicester as well?
I'm going to start with the dark horse. I think the dark horse for me in this competition has to be Luke Humphries, because Luke is having a brilliant year, especially on the Euro Tour. He hasn't been active the last few weeks, but at the time of recording, he is due to become a father in the coming days, and we all know how that went when James Wade became a father for the first time. Luke is in a tough section, but a section with potential for him. He plays his first round against Chris Dobey, and if he comes through that, he'll face either José de Souza or Adrian Lewis. So I think he could well be in the quarterfinals, where he probably will meet Michael van Gerwen. And yeah, that's a more difficult matchup, but we'll see how that goes. For the final, I'll probably be called boring, but I'm going for the same final as this year's match play, which is Gerwin Price against Michael van Gerwen. And I'm going for Michael van Gerwen just to nick it 5-3 or 5-4. But I'll probably change that prediction a few times during the week.
Yeah, you might have to change it if both players go out in the first round. That's what me and Burton usually have to do when we make our picks for these events. But yeah, you mentioned Luke Humphries. I'm going to come back to him in a moment with my picks. I'll start with the dark horse though, and that is a tough one for me. I'm going to go with 2 names because I can't really split them, and they are playing each other in the first round as well. So I'm going to hedge my bets, and I'll have my dark horse through to the second round at least. And it is the game between Ross Smith and Andrew Gilding. Ross Smith got the last spot in the field, and the pressure was on him these last two Euro Tour events because he had to do enough. He had to win enough games to get into the spots to knock Roby John Rodriguez out of it. And you look at some of the performances that he put in over those 2 weekends and the scalps that he picked up as well. 98 average to beat Danny Noppert in the last leg decider, 106 average to beat Damon Heta 6-3, and then the weekend just gone, that the game that he had to win to move into those spots, beat Steve Beaton with 100 average, and in his next game lost with 103 average. So he's putting in some big numbers, and again, going up against Andrew Gilding, who's just made the final, that is a difficult draw for both, but I think both players will be quietly happy about it. So yeah, I'm looking at those two as a dark horse, and I'll give a little mention to another player actually, and I was half tempted to put him as my dark horse, and that is Gary Anderson, because at the time of recording, 50-1 with the title sponsors, Ball Sports, to win the title. And I was trying to think the last time Gary Anderson was 50-1 to win one of these major events. And okay, he is playing Michael van Gerwen in the first round, but race to 2 sets, it can be done. And if he is able to get through that first round game, you're going to see his odds plummet quite a lot. So if you fancy him as a dark horse, I would say put your 10p on him now. But as far as my predicted finalists, top half, he's going to have to come through in all likelihood 4 tough games to make it there. But I'm going to go with the player that you went with, and that is Gerwyn Price from that top half of the draw. Like I said earlier, I just think after what he did in Amsterdam, took last weekend off to recharge the batteries, he knows the importance of this event, someone that has had good runs in it the last couple of years. And yeah, I think he's going to make the final for a 3rd year in a row. And who's he playing that final? You put him as your dark horse. I'm going to back him to get to the final. I'm going to go with Luke Humphries to get through to the final, and a player that's dominated on the Euro Tour at times this year. And I know a lot of people were backing him to do well at the match play. Didn't happen for him on that occasion, but I think he is someone that is getting close to that major breakthrough, and maybe it could be this one. It's going to be Luke Humphries against Gerwyn Price, and I'm going to go with new major winner Luke Humphries to win the World Grand Prix. I think he's going to beat Gerwyn Price. It's going to be a tight final. I'm going to go 5-3. So a week on Sunday, we are going to be crowning our first-time winner of the World Grand Prix in Luke Humphries. And that leaves me to say, Lendel, anything else for this week?
No, just wanted to thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure being on the podcast. So thanks for that.
And well, we should give you a plug as well. Where can people find you? I know you're big on Twitter with the FDI rankings, which I know a lot of our listeners are following. But if they don't, where can they find you on social media?
Twitter at FDI_index, and just hop onto our site dartsoracle.com, and that's where you can find those stats to give you the edge and to give you the extra knowledge that you maybe are looking for.
Definitely, yeah. Myself and Burton, we're big fans of the site. We often use it for our research for this show, so listeners, go and check it out, dartsoracle.com. Do give Lendel a follow on Twitter as well, and leaves me to say thanks. If we did have our guests on, we're not quite sure when we're recording this if we did, but if we did, thanks very much for their time, and we appreciate everyone for listening as well. And thanks to our sponsor Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter as well at dartwolf180. And again, thanks to you, Lendel, for stepping in, and for Burton this week. And the World Grand Prix starts on Monday next week. We'll hopefully have a show next week. Won't be a regular episode of the show, but we are hoping to bring you a few guests for a special episode. So fingers crossed we'll get that to you next week. But until then, hang tight until Monday for the World Grand Prix. And when it does come round, make sure you enjoy the darts.